Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Roxanne Vaudreuil. My company is Crossing Bridges Now, and my talk that I'll be giving to you today is called Step Into You. It's how the origin of our beliefs creates the foundation for our language. So, how we talk to ourselves when nobody else is around. So, the conversation that's always going on in our head, and how we use that basis to validate our external conversation. So, how we would describe ourselves to another, how we essentially see ourselves, whereas people would have a totally different description of how we are. It's how we describe ourselves. And before I get into that, I just wanted to give a little bit about who I am. So, I'm a higher priestess practitioner with the Goddess Healing Matrix System. I have been seated with sutras from the Atharva Veda. I'm an MBCT practitioner, an intuitive clairvoyant, and an intuitive energy healer. So thank you so much for joining me today. So our beliefs have been created in our childhood. Many counselors, as well as psychiatrists and psychologists, have actually documented this information. They've been doing it for quite a while when they decided to change the approach of how they wanted to pay attention and how they actually wanted to focus in on behaviors and how they actually do play a big part in our mental health and how we see ourselves and how we approach problems. And so what it was discovered is that within our childhood, of course, it only makes sense because our values are formed in our childhood as well. So with beliefs, you can see these two little boys here. They look like they could be brothers, right? So in that moment of, and they're happy, they're joyous, but in there now they have a belief that the way that they're interacting, the way that they're playing is creating joy and it's creating trust and it's creating love. So because now it's creating that belief, their language will now be around how this particular circumstance has created those feelings for them. However, at this age, we don't really understand what those feelings are. We just know we have them. The other way we form our beliefs is through our influences. And our influences are our parents. Those are our direct parents, of course. Also our grandparents, and then our extended family, so our aunts and our uncles, and then of course our siblings and our cousins. Our other influences will be other relationships that we form within, our first years of learning. So within the first 6 years is when our beliefs really do form. And that really does start to set that foundation. So just think about it. Just briefly, have you ever thought about the first time that you ever felt jealous over another person? How old were you? The first time that you ever felt like somebody had, really done you wrong, like really hurt you? How old were you? Or when was the first time that you were ever really scared? How old were you? And now think about that belief and now think about the language. Okay? Because what winds up happening is as we go through life and we experience those feelings, we associate it with when we first form that belief, and it keeps compounding and it keeps adding to, and it can get bigger unless we resolve it. Now, as we get older, we understand feelings, but when we're this age, we don't. So beliefs, as you can see in the little bubble there, are repetitive action felt in the form of emotions. And that's how they get formed. And that's the foundation for our language. Okay. And as I mentioned, there's been documentation taken on this. So this is from a publication that Anton Chekhov had put in the Indian Journal of Psychiatry, Man as He Believes. Beliefs originate from what we hear and keep on hearing from others. ever since we are children and even before that. So even when we're in the womb, right? Because we form that sense of security and that sense of love because we can hear our mother's voice, we can hear her heartbeat, also our father, right? We can hear all that, we can experience it. The source of beliefs include environment, events, knowledge, past experiences, visualization, and etc. Beliefs are a combination of experience mixed with emotions felt at that moment. Something was said which is now viewed as right or wrong, safe or unsafe, empowering or disempowering. Okay? What we don't know, though, within those first years of growth is that we actually do have a choice to believe if it's if it's truth or if it's untrue. But we don't really know that because we need those influences. So we need our parents to help guide us through that, right? And that doesn't always happen because what they're doing is they're also teaching us their beliefs. So what we experience can sometimes accelerate or amplify what they're feeling, which now gets projected onto us. But not only that, if we're feeling something that we don't want to tell them, now that's just added to that belief that we're forming. It's kind of interesting how all this works, right? Okay. So you can see that language, so our internal and external language is formed from our core values as well as our core beliefs. And so as I mentioned before, that is how we just keep showing up in the world. That's how we keep describing ourselves, whether we're worthy or unworthy, whether we can accomplish something or not accomplish something. And again, that still comes from what evidence. So the belief. So what gets fed into that belief, okay, that actually creates that foundation and supports the language so that we can either move on in life or and be really successful and be really confident. You've seen those people who are really confident at a younger age, right? And then you see those other people who are struggling. That's all formed on their beliefs, which gets formed from their feelings and repetitive action. Okay. So how can we move out of that? Well, there are ways that we can move out of that. Now, mindfulness was brought into mainstream around I think it was around 1965. And what had happened there was a gentleman, and actually he's in the next slide, so had attended a seminar when he was going to university, and I believe he was going to be a microbiologist, I believe. I think I could be wrong on that. Anyhow, he attended a seminar, being from a Buddhist monk, and he really enjoyed it, and he thought, wow, imagine if we could take this and bring it out to mainstream. So what he did was he removed any religion from it and just practiced, with communication, being mindful in the moment. So being aware of how we're communicating to others. And so with communication, it's not just verbal, right? It's also our actions. It's our behavior. It's our thought. It's the intent behind it, right? So it's all of that that really encompasses mindfulness. But more importantly, it's about being in the moment when you're doing this. So it's not going back in time and pulling that evidence that you know of and bringing it to here so that it accentuates. Have you ever been in an argument with somebody and all of a sudden they bring up something from the past and you're like, whoa, what was that? So they formed a belief about you that now amplifies and gives evidence through their language. Okay, and so that's what winds up happening with all of that. And we can start getting into it a little bit deeper as to how we can, get away from that. So, and how we can get away from that is MBCT. So MBCT stands for Mindfulness-Based Cognitive Therapy. And that was actually brought in. So remember that gentleman? That was John Kabat-Zinn. So he's the founder of modern day mindfulness. He also created a modality called MBSR, Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction. It's an 8-week course, and it's all formatted to reduce your stress. However, not so long ago, and I can't remember when, I think it was around the 10-year mark, Zendel Siegel, Mark Williams, and John Teasdale took this because they thought, wow, imagine what could happen if we actually took this model and we redeveloped it to go a little bit further to deal with depression, anxiety, anger, frustration, sadness. Imagine what we could do. So that's exactly what they did. So they took that 8-week format and they redesigned it. And what it is designed to do is to get to the root cause of when your beliefs are formed, right? That add to the depression. Because what winds up happening is when we say, I am depressed, as soon as you say that, your body is listening, right? You may not actually be depressed. You may only be sad. But as soon as you say, I am depressed, well, now not only have you heard that, but you've now told your entire nervous system that it's depressed. So now it needs to act depressed. And so it will. So that was something that they had decided to pay more attention on. And then they created this program. And that's the same way how it approaches anxiety. Except it is a weekly delayering. So each week you get a little bit deeper into it and get to the heart of it and to really understand why you're saying what you're saying, how cycles seem to keep happening, how sometimes maybe you can only get things done if you're operating in chaos, or why it just feels like you're always trapped in this fear and anxiety state when there's really no reason for it. It's helping you to get to that root cause. So what I've done is I've decided to take this program and go a little bit deeper, and I introduced the 8 phases of the moon cycle with it. Now, the reason for that is because this is something that we as a culture, and it's worldwide, it's not just here in the West or in, say, the UK or even in Australia or New Zealand. It's actually everywhere. Each culture has their own beliefs around the 8 phases, right? How we approach it, how we use it, but there's one thing that we can all agree on, and that is the full moon. Everybody seems to get a little bit weird around the full moon. So just like gravity affects the waves of the ocean, right? How we have the high tide and the low tide, it does the same thing with inside of us. We are made of 80% water, right? So during a full moon, it's pulling our water up, which means it's pulling our emotions up. And now what do we do with it, right? So for a few days, we're all like, ooh, I feel a little bit off and you're just crazy, right? Because that's what we tend to do, right? That's how we associate. So that's why I thought this would be perfect, because during each phase of the 8 lunar, or the cycle of the lunars, the lunar cycles, sorry, there is a practice that we do with the waxing and then the waning waxing and then the crescent moon and so forth and so on, with the full moon as well as the new moon. And what's more popular is what we do for the full moon and what we do for the new moon. That you'll hear more of is let go during a full moon and set your intentions on the new moon. So how did we actually come into developing an 8-phase lunar cycle? Well, to really sort of do that, I kind of started at the more recent time and kind of went backwards. So as you can see, in 1609, Galileo took this instrument that was developed in the Netherlands and he decided to redesign it. and he tweaked it and he added more lenses to it that made it a bit more powerful so that he could see the moon and he could see it clearly. And so he studied it in the between the fall and the winter of that year of 1609. And what he did was, after he documented all that information, he published it. Well, after publishing it and realizing that, it's about a 3 to 4 day cycle between each phase, what could have happened was it could have thrown Easter out of alignment with um, the spring equinox. So that's the calendar that we actually follow today, which is the Gregorian calendar. So what the Pope did, so what Pope Gregory the 12th did, was that he took both the lunar and the sun cycle and he incorporated it together with this information, this new information that was found, so that we could make sure that the spring equinox and Easter were in alignment. Okay. And where he got his information on the sun calendar from was, of course, developed with the Julian calendar from the Egyptians, as well as the lunar calendar, which we've been following much longer than the sun calendar, which was developed by the Sumerians. Okay. So that gives a little bit of history on that. So now, why would I incorporate these two modalities together? Because as mentioned, I've always believed, ever since stepping into this, and I did say always, but I do believe that spirituality really does support mainstream really well. And the reason why I believe that is because I personally have seen counselors throughout my life, and I've even seen a psychiatrist. And the reason for that being is because I had been operating, which I was totally unaware of, but I had been operating in survival mode since the age of 3. And what provoked that was I was sexually abused from the time I was 3 until I was 12. And then when I was 14, I was molested. And I just thought, you know what, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore, right? I need to get out of this. And I wanted to protect my sister. So luckily and thankfully, nothing ever happened to her. However, I did approach my mom. And I had always approached my mom, and I had always talked about it with my mom. And so through this, what I had learned, the reason why she allowed it to keep going, she was actually dealing with depression herself. And she did not know how to deal with it, right? So through my spirituality growth, I've learned that understanding where she was coming from really helped me to support forgiveness and unconditional love for her, which I didn't have before. And so through that, that's why I believe that just bringing basic spiritualism into a very effective healing modality to help you let go of anxiety and depression can really support you. But not only that, what it does do is it encourages you to manifest, and it encourages you to really let go and to set intentions. And you do that every lunar cycle. So you always get a new beginning every month, right? Every day is a new beginning. But this really helps you to explore. This has been spread out over 8 weeks, so they support each other, and that's how it's been created, and that's how I wanted to create it. So just getting back to all that, the other thing that I really learned about inviting spiritualism into my life was that it really helped me to let go. And when I was getting to when my beliefs were created to the root cause, what I didn't understand was that it was also the foundation for my language, right? I learned that through spiritualism. I didn't necessarily learn that through the healing modalities that I was doing. Now, one of the things that I have noticed is that the more that we evolve, the more that we're bringing these natural ways of being into our healing modalities. When we approach mental health and when we approach depression and anxiety. So I think that's wonderful, and I think it's fantastic. Um, so yes, so a little exercise for you. If you're up to it, and if you're not, that's perfectly okay. So in one column, so what I want you to do is create 3 columns. In your first column, I want you to put down 5 core values. So something that is highly important to you, something that you value highly. Is it security? Is it comfortability? Is it achievement? Is it evolving? What is it for you? Put it in that column. Okay. In your second column, what I want you to do is write down when that belief. So when did you form that value? What was the belief? Now remember, beliefs happen within our first 6 years of of living. So was it based on an incident that happened to you as a child? Was it based on something that you experienced? Was it based on something you heard, or was it based on something that you were told? So that's what I want you to do in the second column. Okay. Now in the third column, I want you to rate that. So I want you to rate your core value and your belief. How important is it to you? 1 through 5. Okay. Your final step. I want you to take that rating, that 1 to 5 rating, and now I want you to write down the words that you use to explain. How do you approach it? What's your internal language that's been created from that? And now what's your external language that you use? How do you support that? Now I want you to dissect it even more. Is it true or is it untrue? Okay. Can you reform that? Can you identify the feelings that come up when you look at that? And can you release it? Can you let it go? Now, can you reestablish a new way of being? Okay. So I've just thrown a lot at you in that little bit, but that is how we get to the core of how the belief was made and then how the language is created from that. Okay. I hope you've enjoyed this talk. Not chalk, but talk. I've really enjoyed presenting it for you. So if you have any questions at all, please reach out to me. Once again, my name is Roxanne. My company is Crossing Bridges Now. You can Google it. It'll come up. And yes, take care of you. Be well in all ways. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you so much for stopping in